If you're ready to emote on the reg, you're ready for this episode of Dad Chat.
Just want to finish these chats with Dad. Dad, I just want to chat with you some more.
Welcome to another episode of Dad Chat.
Dad stuff, okay?
For everything dads need to know about business, life, news, and doing everything they need to do to take over the world.
Take over the world.
And still get home in time for dinner.
Time for dinner, sweetie.
With your hosts, Greg Roulette and Matthew Goldfarb.
It is time for some Dad Chatting. Greg here with Matt, and we have your news, your insights, and your inside look into how you as a dad can take over the world and still get home in time for dinner. And we are, Mr. Matthew, at episode 7. Dude, 7 episodes already. That's pretty fancy.
Yeah, man. It feels like just yesterday we were rocking episode 1, and look how far we've come.
It's incredible, and I'm really excited. I think something that you told me, and I'd love for you to tell a little bit of the story is you went to, I don't remember if it was a barbecue, friend's house or whatever over the weekend, and like people are talking about this stuff. You guys are having conversations. I think that's the whole point of what we're doing here. So just even in the 6 episodes that are out there, we're already starting to see like people talking about this stuff, which is that's pretty cool.
Yeah. We had Nate's birthday party this weekend, and one of my good buddies, he drives a lot, so he's kind of constantly going back between Mass and New York, and he was kind of binge listening, and he was like, he called me up last week and said, I have a lot of strong thoughts. And at the party, we got engaged in a good 10-minute dialogue just about some of the articles and, some of his thoughts. And it was really cool just to see that people are actually engaging and really connecting to what we're talking about. I even got an email from my ex-mother-in-law after our first episode saying, I think it's time for me to get the new iPhone, because she had iPhone 6. And I was like, yeah, I think it's time to upgrade. So yeah, it's definitely really fun.
So what you're saying is Apple needs to be giving us some sponsor dollars is what you're really saying, I think. Apple, if you're listening.
I am not opposed to saying this show is brought to you by blank. So come at us.
Yeah. Real quick, we do have some really cool 5-star reviews. I'm not going to read all of them, but I wanted to share one of them from spotcoolstuff.com. Left us a 5-star review and said, a must listen for thoughtful dads. Matt and Greg give their hot take on articles and topics thoughtful dads care about. Great listen. So thank you so much, spotcoolstuff.com. And I think he actually sent us an article that we are going to be talking about today, which is really cool. Again, the engagement, I think, is awesome. And I'm going to kick this off. In the last episode 6, we went through a little bit of your story, a little bit of your journey and, being a single dad and what you do for a living. And you sent me this really cool article from Refinery 29 that's all about co-parenting. It says, I love my kid, but co-parenting with my ex is an emotional roller coaster. And that's kind of the home that I came in, right? It was an emotional roller coaster. My mom and dad were always yelling at each other, and you kind of have the opposite relationship with your ex, which is, kind of cool that you can be civil and do the right things for your kid and the right things for each other. So what caught your eye here, and what do we need to know about this co-parenting journey that people might be on today?
Definitely. So, obviously it was just the article name itself caught my attention, because I'm obviously very sensitive to the notion of co-parenting. And, little known fact, my other job title in life appears to be the divorce whisperer. So every time any one of my friends is going through a divorce, they come to me because they know that I had handled this, and my ex and I had handled this in a very positive manner, trying to cause the least amount of damage. And so I'm always kind of coaching and guiding friends about how to get through it as unscathed as possible. And this article, it's interesting. It makes it sound a lot worse than it is. This is basically the story of this couple who had been in a loving relationship, had gotten, I think, divorced after 2 years of marriage, and they live actually about 120 miles away. And it's the story about how their daughter fell and broke her arm in 3 places. And she basically is just talking about the evolution of the relationship and kind of how sometimes when things go down and things that they disagree with, they sometimes want to go at each other, but then they stop for a moment to realize that it's not always about them. It's really about their kids, and really kind of working towards a positive goal. And so to me, that really spoke, because obviously, I've been divorced for a couple of years now. When I got separated and divorced, we had our troubles, but we kind of made a really conscious decision when we separated that we were A, never going to fight in front of our kid, and B, really try to see the other person's viewpoint and really try to work together. And I think when you have kids, it's so easy to use them as pawns. It's so easy to get caught up in stuff that isn't necessarily beneficial for them. And this was just a really powerful article about how to put your differences aside and really focus on what matters most.
Yeah, there's a great line towards the end of the article that says, the most important thing we've had to do is put our kids first. But then here's my favorite line in the entire article. It says, it's easier than it sounds, right? As we all know, like, hey, let's put our kids first. Again, way easier than it sounds. She goes on to say, in real life, co-parenting life, that means thinking before we speak to or about each other, letting a lot of little things go, like the socks, and remembering that at one point we did love each other. So really, really cool article. If you're in a co-parenting situation, I think go back and listen to episode 6 with some of the tips and insights that you shared about, your relationship, and check out this article. I think it's really, really cool to see different viewpoints, different sides of the equation. And that, at the end of the day, I think we all are trying to put our kids first, but it is easier said than done. Even in a joint parenting situation, we say we're putting our kids first, but I have 100 things going on with business, and I want to make time for Jen, and I want to it's easier than it sounds, even though I think deep down in our hearts, we want to put our kids first. Life happens, and communication, I think, is going to be key. So really, really cool stuff. This next one is a fun one. It comes from Heart, and it says, Dad slammed for destroying his 8-year-old son's artwork to teach him a lesson. The parent ripped up his son's drawing as punishment for him doing the same to his sister. Man, so I know that, in the midst of it, I get angry, I get upset, and I could probably see myself doing something similar in the heat of the moment. And this dad just got totally ripped. So talk to me a little bit about this one.
Yeah, this one, this is definitely one of those ones that I sit there and I really was like, well, how would I react in this? Now, I only have one, you have 3, but I know a lot of our listeners have probably both. But my son's got friends, and there are times where he's being a little shit or his friend's being a little shit to him, and they'll do something, and you almost want to teach somebody a lesson, but it's like, what is the best way to do it? And so this dad, basically, his 8-year-old ripped up his 6-year-old sister's artwork, said it wasn't anything special, and so he tried to get payback and said, hey, well, not payback, but teach him a lesson of, hey, what you did wasn't special. And really, in this article, people went crazy because they said there's a big difference between an 8-year-old ripping up a 6-year-old and, an adult ripping up his kid's thing, and that it's a lot more traumatizing to the kid than what the little kid did to his sister. And so I kind of sat there saying, I'm not 100% sure how I would have reacted in this situation. I don't know. What would you have done here?
It's interesting. As I read the article and I read some of the comments that people posted on Reddit and things of that nature, it was, the reason he was acting like a child is because he is a child, and it doesn't mean that you should act like a child talking to the dad. And so logically that makes a ton of sense, but also logically I could see myself, ripping up something from Colton because he ruined something from Ryder. Like, I could see myself doing that. I'm not saying that it's right. But in that moment, you're trying to act, there's a lot of emotions, and I see it as something that could possibly happen. Now, I don't think that it's right. I think that the right thing would be to, sit down, to talk about it, to figure out what went wrong. Why did he rip that up? Like, all of those things. But in the moment, I could see myself doing it too. But what I think that we need to understand about this is that, to me, like, every day, all 3 of my kids, well, at least the 2 older ones, Ashton's not coming home with art projects yet, but when they come home, like, every day there's like 9 things in their folder, whether it's math homework or something they were reading or something they drew or this. Like, to me, I'm just like, yeah, like, every day there's like 9 things. So over the course of a week, there's like a million things. So over the course of a month, my kitchen counter now has so to me, I'm like, all of this is kind of meaningless, but to them, something in there might be the first time that they ever drew a circle the right way, or the first time that they ever colored inside the lines, or so to them, these insignificant pieces of art really are, whether it's milestones, whether it's an achievement, they are gold star, like, whatever it is to them, these things are really important. And as parents, we need to remember that even though it's just math homework and they get 5 of them every week, 20 of them every month, when they, to them, there might be something major in there that is of importance to them. And we need to not discredit that because we were emotional in the moment. So that's something that I kind of took away from it, is remembering that even though it might be seemingly insignificant to you as the parent, it might be significant to them as the children.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, I find with Nate, like, whatever he's done that day is the most important thing to him in that moment. And so like I look at this and it's like I don't think the 8-year-old really thought about the impact of what he was doing to his 6-year-old sister, but I do think it is more devastating, I think, if it was done by a parent versus a sibling. And so yeah, we're emotional people. We at times, I still think I'm a kid at times, but yeah, you have to try to find a way to separate yourself and think with that higher mind. And sometimes it happens, and sometimes our emotions get the best of us, and we're learning as we go through this as well.
We sure as heck are. And something that we're learning a lot about is, and we talk a lot about here on the podcast, is cell phones and mobile phone usage. And here, an article from The Independent says that a school bans parents from using phones in the playground to stop them ignoring their children. You don't even need to read the article to know that this is a problem. Every time that I take, the kids to the park, I see almost every single parent unengaged on their phone, mindlessly scrolling like zombies, and their kids are climbing. Again, it goes back to what you just said, that, to them, what they're doing in that moment is the most important thing in their life. Them to climb the rock wall for the first time, them to do the big boy slide or the big girl slide for the first time, for them to, go on this, like whatever that it is. So many parents are using and substitute playground with anything else as a way to check out and not be there for their kids. And I'm guilty of this. Matt, I'm making an assumption that at one point in time you've been guilty of this. I think everyone in today's society pulls out the phone.
I'm perfect. I've never
I know you are.
Yes.
So what do you think about this? Should we be banning cell phones at parks and schools and things like that, or again, does it just come back to being mindful? And if you're a good dad, if you're an ambitious dad, that you should be engaged at the park. Like, what do you think about all this?
I think this is a case where it's the right sentiment, it's the right idea, but I think the concept of trying to force something like this is problematic to me. I agree, and if you read it talks about kind of the heartstrings and how kids can feel disconnected. I think it's one of those things that if you try to enforce it, it's kind of like, screw you, I'm going to do what I want. But I do think the sentiment is correct, where we have to think about, you have a kid who's been playing all day, they're really tired and excited, and they run up to see you and you're on the phone, and it just deflates them. And that can just totally take the air out of their tires for the entire day that they're having. And so I think it is about being more mindful. I don't know how I feel about, having specific rules, because even if these specific rules, if I'm the kind of parent who's going to do it, I'm the kind of parent who's going to do it. So it is really about trying to become the kind of person who, when it's time to show up and pick up your kids, like you're on and you're paying attention. And when you're at the park, you're there, so that these things don't happen.
Great point. I agree with you that it's the right idea, but the wrong way to do it. Like, we don't need, if we're forcing parents to turn the phone off, it's not solving the problem, even though you might think that it's solving the problem. So, again, as a listener to this podcast, hopefully, you care about these things and you want to be there for your kids, and just make the right decision. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't maybe check a text message, or you're texting your wife to say, hey, 5 more minutes, we're on our way home, because phones are a part of our lives. And I don't think they're going away. It's only going to get worse over time. So, but just be mindful that you're there. You took them to the park so you could be a part of their life, not so you could zone out and tune out. You could just put on a TV show at home for 20 minutes to zone out, and not that that's the right solution either, but more rules, more laws, more things like that isn't going to fix the parenting problem. It's going to be you as the parent who fixes the parenting problem.
Yeah. And I'll say this happened to me 2 weeks ago. I was on the phone as I was picking up Nate with a buddy of mine. He's going through a rough divorce, and we've been trying to connect. And so he as I'm talking to him, I'm like, listen, I'm about to go pick up Nate, and he's just going off about some bad stuff. And so I'm trying to get off the phone, but trying to be a good friend, show up. Nate runs over to me and I'm on the phone, and I could see the look on his face like, oh, you're on the phone. And that killed me. And so then I just said to my friend, I go, look, I got to go. I'm sorry. And I said to Nate, hey, I'm sorry about that. I was just, talking to my buddy who's having a tough time, but I just don't want to be that person. And so you find other times to do those things. So I've been there, as perfect as I like to, pretend that I am.
that is one of the worst feelings, when they're like, Daddy, put down the phone, and I'm like, oh shit, like, not the way I want to represent myself in front of them. So this one's really cool. This is our first suggestion from you guys. So as you guys see articles or having conversations, send us stuff so that we can talk about them and continue those conversations. This is cool. It is a really quick audio. It's like 2.5 minutes or so that was sent in from one of our listeners. So big shout out to you. Thanks for sending that in. And it says, the title of it is a great burden was lifted. A father's made-up day of forgiveness. So, Matt, I know you listened to this last night. Tell me a little bit about what it was all about, this day of forgiveness, and what you think about what this listener shared with us.
So this is an NPR article, and basically it was kind of prefaced with that it was just Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday, which is all about atonement and forgiveness for your sins of the past year. And basically it was this idea about this family. They created this tradition called Amnesty Day, where basically during this day, you could essentially confess mistakes or errors that you've made over the past year or at any time in your past that have been kind of plaguing you. And it was this story about this family where the kid had, I think he said he had lit a fire in the toilet seat. He lit a fire in the toilet because he wanted to see it, and then what happened was, as he was flushing it down, it burnt the toilet seat, and he freaked out. So he went and got all these like watercolors and painted the seat and made it into an art project. But then even though his dad was like, "Oh, you did this thing," he noticed that the kid wasn't talking. He was being really quiet, and he's like, "Something is wrong. Why don't you tell me what's going on?" And the kid told him. And then afterwards, the kid felt a lot better. And so it was kind of this one day a year where you can just talk about the things that you've done, the mistakes you've made, and just get it off your chest so that you can move on with your life. Because so often kids will make little mistakes when they're young. It feels so damn big. And it's like very just traumatizing to them or just overwhelming that if you just gave them the space to just say, "Daddy, I did this," or "Mommy, I did this," and you being able to say, "All right, I don't love that you did this, but that's okay." It just allows space for kids to be open and talk to you. And that's why I just thought it was a really cool article. It really, tugged at my heart. And I was like, oh, this is really great. It's also probably great for business as well. Like being able to tell your boss or, for you telling a partner, "Hey, I screwed up," but not realizing the world will not come to an end just because you made a mistake.
So playing devil's advocate, how realistic is this in practicality? Meaning, like, will your kids actually fess up to stuff, right? Now hey, I, forgot to, I ate an extra cookie or something, but like, how realistic is it that kids are going to rat on themselves for lighting a fire in, the bathroom or for, blurting out curse words or for whatever it is that they do? Is it realistic for them to do it? I mean, I know, the last couple of days we've had a couple of issues with Colton just being a little sad and emotional and crying and, different things that not really his behavior, but like he won't utter a word about why. I'm like, "Are you hurt? Are you sore? Did someone being mean to you?" It's like I can't get a word out of him. He just wants to kind of sit there in silence. So like, how realistic is it that kids will actually fess up on a day of forgiveness or a day of atonement or whatever it is that you want to call it, even penalty free? I just don't know the reality of them fessing up or coming clean, and if it solves anything. Now, if your kids fess up, probably great, but I don't see any of my boys, telling dad or mom all the things that they did, even with no repercussions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is about setting the tone. I think when a kid screws up, we have to be kind of careful on how we react to it. I think if you have a kid who wants to say, "Hey, I made this mistake," and someone's like, "What's wrong with you? What are you thinking? Why are you so dumb?" or "Why are you so this?" they're never going to want to tell it again. But if they do get the experience of saying, "Hey, I made a mistake and it's okay," they're more likely to start to feel more open. It's really comes down to the relationship you have with your kids and kind of encourage them to say, "It's okay if you made a mistake, but let's talk about it." And especially if it's bothering you, I'd rather us talk about it and move on versus you kind of just sitting there and letting it fester. But it really comes down to creating a space where your kid feels safe to talk to you. And sometimes that's easier said than done.
I completely agree. So in the show notes, make sure you go check out that audio and let us know what you think. Like, is that something that would work with your kids? Do you think it's, silly and not worth even doing? How are you working that out? Let us know because, again, we want to hear from you guys what you guys think of this kind of stuff. Jumping to another really cool article. This is actually makes me feel old that we're sharing this, but this was actually sent in from one of our female listeners of the podcast, which is awesome. So shout out to all the moms and the ladies out there who are listening to Dad Chat. It's from the girlfriend from AARP. So just that, does that make you feel old that we're getting articles from the AARP?
Oh my God, I don't even want to talk about it. It's yeah, a little bit, but it's I'm not even going to go down that road. But let's get past the AARP.
Yeah, we won't go there.
I won't talk about my gray hairs today.
Let's get past it. It's actually a decent article. The article is called "The 3 Secret Insecurities Shared by Men Over 40." Turns out the dude struggle is real. And if you're reading the AARP and you still call yourself a dude, I think that's freaking awesome because then you're living your life. So the man struggles that they share here are power, emotions, and big manhood energy. So I guess let's start with like the first one, like power. Now, so I'm not at 40 yet. I'm creeping there. I turned 37 this weekend, which I'm pretty excited about, even though it's one tick closer to 40.
Birthday.
Thanks, man. Well, I agree that we are all like that. I think that's just like a male characteristic is that we are always striving for power. I think we talked about it. I think it was episode 4, the Ryan Holiday article about, having like always chasing that next goal. And I think that's part of power is like, as we grow, we feel like we need to assert our power and our dominance and just, our place in the world. So I do believe that, having power is a struggle for guys. And if you haven't reached that level of success by 40, 45, 50, there is a clock. And I think that that is a struggle for people. What, any thoughts when it comes to power when you hit that big 40?
Yeah. It's funny. The word power didn't resonate with me. I wasn't like, I don't walk into a room and say, I have to be the most powerful guy and, who can I crush in it? But I do think about respect. And I do think about when I work on a project or I go into a room, wanting to feel like I'm getting respect and wanting to feel as though people will actually value what I have to say and what I have to offer. And so the power dynamic is a little strange. And I'm actually watching the show Succession right now on HBO, which is all about power and it's quite insane. But yeah, that one, getting respect and to feel like you have a voice and people hear what you're saying and respect what you have to offer, that does speak to me. But I don't know if the word power was like, the big one that's yelled out to me.
Yeah. So we're going to throw this out to you guys. If you're hitting that 40, you're close to it, just hit it, or you're over that 40, how do you think about power? Do you feel that you need to assert your power? What is that? Where does that play in your psyche? The second one here is emotions. And the article starts off by saying, I'm programmed not to show emotion, especially with other men. Man up is the battle cry that forces us to hide insecurities. And that emotions are the kryptonite to the average American male. It means you're less than a man. We all know that's not true, but actually emoting on the reg isn't easy. He's using a lot of like funny slang for an AARP article. Emoting on the reg. I haven't used that phrase before, but I
don't think I've ever used the word emoting.
So no, and I definitely don't emote on the reg. But I think a podcast like this where you and I get to talk about some of these things that, probably aren't coming up in small talk when you're just talking about the game or catching up with people is a start in the emotional side. Obviously the more that we can talk about these things, society definitely is changing. I still feel like I do hide a lot of emotions. I still do have the kind of man up. We talked about it with the sports stuff and how I get on Colton to make sure that he is playing his best. So I think that there is still some of that, be a man side that I bring to the table. But I also know that bottling up your emotions is bad for you because that's when the stress comes in. That's when, you feel like there's so much pressure and you can't get out of it. And I think you dig yourself into a hole with it. But having a show like this, you and I get to kind of emote on the reg every week and talk about some topics that I think is really fun. And, even just listening to other men kind of talk about how they're raising their kids and growing their business and dealing with everyday struggles, even just, I think the act of listening to a podcast like this is probably good for our emotional state. So I'll let you chime in on kind of the emotional state here.
Yeah. Well, first off, I think I'm gonna propose "Emote on the Reg" as this week's episode title for sure. Obviously. Yeah. It is funny. I mean, I've definitely always been a sensitive dude. So, and I'm gonna say dude right now. And I used to get made fun of by a lot of my guy friends, and now as a lot of my friends are in their 40s, they're becoming more emotional. They're kind of learning where they've not done it. And so there is definitely a sea change. But I definitely think a lot of people, depending on the type of work they're in, they do feel like they can't talk about their emotions and everything has to just be a joke. And so I think there is just a big change going on. And I agree with you that basically when you bottle up your anger, when you bottle up all your stuff, it does lead to a lot of dysfunction. That's where a lot of depression and all that stuff comes in. So I do think guys are often scared to show their emotions, but I think there is a culture changing where we can talk about how we're feeling and let it kind of pass through us and move on to other things.
And the other things happen to be your big manhood energy, playing games of big dick, little dick, as the author here talks about. It's kind of this comparison syndrome. And again, I think this is very correlated with power, is that, we have an innate kind of human nature to compare ourselves. In business, we're comparing ourselves to other business owners. Man, his business is bigger than mine, and we started at the same time. He's got the bigger house, the bigger car, the this, the that. Like, we're always kind of measuring up to other people, especially, I think, people that are whether they went to the same high school as us, whether they, people in what should be similar situations. And we went, man, like, I'm measuring up to him or I'm crushing him. And there's part of me that definitely has those pieces. And high school, Greg, I want to crush everybody from my high school, right? Like, there's just that part of me that at my 20-year reunion, I want to be like, I'm better than all of you. And I know that's not right, but part of me, like, I want that feeling. And again, that might not be the right thing to want, but that's there for sure. The second piece of it, as I've kind of grown and matured as a business owner, and I got a lot of work to do, is it's not comparing myself to others, but comparing myself to myself. Is how am I doing year over year, month over month, week over week, day over day? Am I making better choices when it comes to my health? Not do I have six-pack abs like this guy down the street who's also 37 years old and has the same, like, it's not comparing myself to him. It's, am I doing better day over day, week over week, year over year? That's really the only comparison I think that matters. Is my business better today? Is my family life better today? Is my marriage better today? Am I being a better dad today than I was? Because I think that is the true human evolution, is, are we growing as people, not just comparing ourselves to the people down the street? Because you don't know what shit they're going through. You don't know what breaks that they got. You don't know how hard they're working at 3 a.m. while you're sleeping. So comparing yourself to yourself, to me, is the true barometer. I got a long way to go, but I'm starting to think more like that versus I want to smash everyone from my high school and, be the best kid that graduated from that class. The kind of that comparison syndrome. So how do you deal with that, especially as your career, you and I have both had ups and downs and ebbs and flows, and, years where we're crushing it and just things that everything's going great, and years where we're like, oh shit, like, is this where I'm at in business now and life now? So how do you think about this kind of comparison, big dick, little dick syndrome, as it would be?
Yeah, well, dude, there's nothing worse than going onto Instagram and seeing one of your old colleagues publish a New York Times bestseller, or like, someone that you knew from high school who was kind of a screw up and now they're like a big guru or something. It messes with your mind. And I think you're absolutely right. It's so easy to get caught in the comparison trap without knowing what opportunities they've had, how hard they've worked, what there really is going on. And I think you're right. It is about yourself. And it is kind of, seeing that, hey, you're on a journey, and I am in a better place than I was 6 months ago. I'm in a better place than I was a year ago. And just learning to be okay with it, because at the end of the day, the competition is really just against yourself. It doesn't really matter. You have to live with you. And so if you can learn to find peace with that, you're going to feel a lot better about yourself. And that insecurity is not going to haunt you as much as it happens. But I'm just like you. I mean, I go through this as well, and it's a conscious struggle, and I have to consciously be aware and I have to pay attention. My words are failing me apparently.
Yeah, well, you got to emote on the reg.
Yes.
You know, if you emoted on the reg, then, you know, you'd be so much better. So awesome, man. Well, this is a really cool episode. A lot of wide-ranging things here. We want to know what you think about it, so hit us up on the gram. Both of our Instagram handles are in the show description. Just tag us, let us know, or on Twitter or wherever else that you frequent. And feel free to send us your articles, free to send us your opinions, because we'd love to talk about that stuff. This is bigger than just what Matt and I are doing. We are dad chatting for all the dads out there who don't just want to emote on the reg, but who do want to, you know, live an incredible life and do it both professionally, personally, and with their kids. So my man, Matt, great episode as usual. And thanks for taking some time out today.
Thank you, my friend. We'll see you next time.
See you next time on Dad Chat.